What experience of yours is so crazy you don't tell people about it because they wouldn't believe you? I once spent a few nights in Yosemite, basically just hiking and getting drunk from time to time. One night myself and a group of friends hiked to the top of this little mountain near Camp Tuanga. I distinctly remember all of us seeing this meteorite fall into the atmosphere and briefly light up the sky, but that's the last thing I remember. It's as if I blinked and it was late afternoon. I got off the ground. Nobody was around me anymore and my ribs were in a ton of pain. Scared the shit out of me. I started running down the hill following the path hoping it would take me back to people. I still remember running and it feeling like I was in a nightmare, like a Twilight Zone where everyone disappeared. Luckily I got back to my camp and my buddy was freaking out asking where I went and that he was this close to calling 911 to put out a search party for me. I tried my best to just wave it off, but it freaked me out so much to just lose 16 hours like that. The part that scared me the most was to this day I have this thing in my rib where the pain was. No scar. Went to the doctors about it. Doesn't show up on an x-ray. Non-cancerous etc. Yeah. You. Totally got abducted. Just uploaded a video of it. Holy shit man. I would be so tempted to cut it out. Absolutely. Cut it and let's see. Manchurian Candidate style. I used to sweat blue for a few months. My clothes, nails, and phone cover all got stained blue. It went away after a while on its own, which was good, because the doctors couldn't figure it out. Pseudochromhidrosis. Link in description. I was like 12 years old, and played with my dog in the backyard. He suddenly stopped, and just looked at my leg. There was a piece of wood in my leg. It was 8 centimeters long, and at 90-degree angle in my leg. It didn't hurt. I didn't feel anything. To this day I'm wondering how this stick found its way into my leg. This is some enemy stand shit. One day completely out of the blue my daughter, 8, started telling me she wanted to look out the window to see shooting stars. I told her it's very rare to see any shooting stars where we live, Yonkers, New York. She was really adamant that we should look and try to see one anyway. So I walk with her over to our living room window and look out with her. I swear not 10 seconds had passed before a meteor went streaking by, closer than any I had ever seen. You could see the trail it left in the sky and it glowed bright red. She got so excited and ran to tell my wife that she saw one. My wife does not believe that me or my daughter saw a meteor that quickly. I swear on my life it happened. When I was younger I worked at a popular theme park in the UK as a ride assistant. One of the rides I worked on was the River Rapids. 2 young Scouse lads who had obviously been drinking got on, and it was clear they were going to be a pain in the ass. As the raft came towards the end, they both were running around the outsides of it. The raft hits the wall, and they both fell in. This is near the lift section of the ride which, if they'd been snagged, would have torn them up badly. I ran down, and God knows how, managed to pull them both out. They were both swiftly escorted to the medical center and I'm assuming off park. The same day, after I finished work, I went to go and see a friend for a few hours, and on my way home I follow a car that is all over the place. The car hits a curb and flips onto its roof. I stop my car, run across, yank the doors open and pull both of the occupants out. Same two lads had pulled out of the water at work earlier in the day. You clearly interrupted some Final Destination stuff right there. Twice. Death. 3rd time's the charm. My father was adopted, and he died when I was a toddler. It was a closed adoption, but my grandparents who adopted him were told some things about his birth parents, occupation, the country they were from, etc. The occupation sounded made up to me, and I always thought my grandpa was just trying to make my dad feel better about the people who gave him up. Earlier this year my aunt, also adopted but from another family, and cousins were doing ancestry DNA kits. I decided to Google the occupation and country of origin that my grandparents had been told about, and within 45 seconds I found a man who looked exactly like my father. My entire family was flawed. Turns out he is famous in his country and won some very well-known awards. I messaged him on LinkedIn and he confirmed that his child was put up for adoption without his consent. The dates matched, and the resemblance to my father was uncanny. He always thought that his son would come looking for him due to his fame. He introduced the parents of a very famous celebrity that almost anyone would know. We talked for a month or so, but now we don't. He has other children and I don't think his wife liked the idea of a random grandchild coming out of the woodwork. I really just wanted to meet him as I don't have any memories of my father and have always had questions about my heritage. He seemed very sweet and was devastated that my father had passed away so tragically. But yeah, the TL doctor I found my dad's biological family despite a closed adoption. My grandpa is famous and incredibly wealthy, but we've never met, and he doesn't want to talk to me anymore. Sounds pretty unbelievable to me. No one's going to ask who is your grandfather? Okay, I'll do it. Who is he? Heckin' gonna leave us wondering like this? I dislike cryptic posts as much as the next person, so I was on the fence about posting the story in the first place. I just don't think it is my place to give away his identity, especially along with information that he probably isn't keen on sharing. I 100% agree with you that it's a good thing to keep his privacy, but that little part of me is so completely intrigued about who he is. When I was a teenager I almost got run over by Robert Pattinson in my hometown. It's a smaller city between Bruges and Ghent. He was driving a Mercedes, probably on his way from Brussels to the hotel he was staying in on the coast. I'm 100% sure it was him. He was in Brussels for a premiere for the latest Twilight movie at the time. Only told my dad. I think some people would pay to have Robert Pattinson run over them. Was crossing the border at the Golden Triangle from Thailand into Myanmar. Had a heat stroke due to dehydration and passed out in the middle of the street right after the passport control. Woke up to 5 armed soldiers pointing rifles in my face. Don't speak a word of Thai or any other Asian language. I signaled I need to drink water with my hands and they gave me a Coca-Cola and helped me sit down in a nearby chair. It's too bad you didn't speak the language. Because they were saying, hey, you're finally awake. You were trying to cross the border, right? Fuck. I like watching wild birds at my work. I watched a young magpie steal bread off a raven. The magpie's family then attacked the young magpie, took the bread off, and gave it back to the raven. They were bird yelling at the young bird, then called to the young magpie and kinda forced it to the front of the pack to the raven. The adult magpies gently pecked at the young magpie until it sung at the raven. Then the magpies all waddled away and went back to hunting for bugs. I feel like I watched some sort of family magpie discipline to prevent an interspecies bird war. I watched a robin devour a hummingbird, killing it immediately, and after a group of crows attacked the robin and almost killed it. Ravens are smart, and they have great memory. Apparently they can rally against people and point out aggressors, so the rest of the pack know they are aggressive. I was on a train and this train had one of those chains which you pull in case of an emergency, and it stops the train. And if you pull it for no reason you can face up to 2 years in prison and a huge fine. So I was just sitting, and when I decided to get up, to go to the washroom, I was kind of stuck. So I used the nearest thing to help me get up, and what I pulled was the chain. Suddenly the train stopped, and I was like, oh crap, here I go to the prison. When suddenly people started running out of the train. P.S. The train had no doors. You would understand if you know what an average local Indian train looks like. I don't know about other countries, and what I realized was that a compartment of the train was on fire. So, that's how I survived from going to prison and accidentally saved the train. I told this story to a friend, but he would not believe me, so I just let it go. TLDR, I saved train, and no go prison. Somebody saw you accidentally pull it, and decided to save you from prison. Oh god, I hope you are right and wrong at the same time, lol. It's my time to shine. Arsonist with some degree of morality. Chaotic good. One time after school I was emptying my bag on my bed. I had a sandwich wrapped in cling wrap from lunch that I didn't eat. I dropped the sandwich on the floor and I went to pick it up. I couldn't find it anywhere. I checked under my bed, in my bag, all over the floor, and under any items. I never found that sandwich. Dude, I had a friend who dropped an avocado in her kitchen and never found it. Even when they moved it never turned up. Once when I was 8 I was climbing out of the bathtub after showering. Since I was wet and shit, my mom wrapped me up in a towel, so my hands were wrapped as well. I ended up tripping over the edge of the bathtub and face planted onto the ground, where I just laid there kinda comatose for a second. So I tried to get up, blood flowing down my face from a cut in my head and my nose, and my bucket of crabs nearby. This was a seaside resort, toppled over and went all over me, and they were like in a blood frenzy or something, because they pinched me all over. So I started rolling on the ground. Lovely experience BTW. My family kinda just stared at me. I bled from my nose for 3 hours after being rescued from the crabs, and got sent to hospital, where my nose actually wasn't broken. My family refuses to acknowledge it ever happened, even though I have a hospital bracelet with that date. Oddest thing ever. Either you were out of your mind and built a fake memory of why you were in the hospital, or your family was in shock from the blood and deleted their memories of the incident, or they just hope you forget all of it because they're ashamed of not being able to help you with it. That's the kind of things that would make me question reality. Look, if your sacrifice to the crab god goes wrong, you don't talk it out later. Opened the Frigidaire. Edit jar of mustard came falling down. It hit the ground and I already thought, great. Now I have to clean all of it up. But I genuinely didn't hear it hitting the ground. When I looked down there was nothing there. No glass shards. Mustard. Nothing. Looked around for a good 5 minutes questioning my reality. Turns out it kinda repelled of the ground and landed in the winner shelf next to the fridge. Like 1.5 feet above the floor. Upright. Standing. It straight up did a bottle flip off the floor. It dropped a solid 6 feet on hard ground and just bounced. Still questioning the laws of physics to this date. Kinda reminds me about those videos where people drop light bulbs and they bounce once before they crack. Probably the same, but without the cracking. Yeah, maybe it seriously weakened the mustard jar and next time Op even opens it, it's going to break down in 1,000 pieces. Maybe next time Op opens the fridge he will break down into pieces. Back in high school a few years ago I had a photography class with my best friend and we went to New York City to take pictures for an assignment. We were walking through Times Square, and there's always people trying to hand out flyers or comedy club promise, bus tours, etc. This pretty girl got our attention, and she was talking to us about a book. I can't remember the name. Anyway, she's explaining this book to us, and suddenly she's like, I have someone who can talk to you about this book in more detail. Come with me. And she grabbed my friend and I by the arm and starts walking us somewhere down like 42 RV. If I remember correctly, it ends up being a Scientology church. At the time I had no idea about Scientology and was just curious what heck was going on. So she walks us through the door and immediately a small group of people approaches us. She tells them we want to join, and their eyes light up. One of the leaders I guess comes over, and the girl basically hands off to him. He leads us down a hallway and says something along the lines of, we have a special movie for you. So we are brought into a small backquote theater, if you could call it that. Maybe like 20 chairs and a small screen. He says the video lasts about half an hour and leaves, closing the door behind him. After 2 seconds my buddy and I finally go WTF and head for the door. Turns out it's locked. We looked around the room for any other door, but it was dark except for the light from the screen. I really did think we were gonna get gassed. The video was about how each of us will have untapped superpowers and this was more or less an instructional video of how to activate them. It was so absurd. When the video ended they opened the doors and asked us to fill out a contact form. Nope. We beelined it for the door and got out immediately. Headed to Midtown Comics to catch our breaths and then went about our day. I've told people before and they've been skeptical and dismissive by saying, well, why didn't you just get out immediately, or why didn't you break free from the girl, etc. IDKTBH. In the moment I didn't feel threatened or scared. I wasn't even sure what was happening because it was so sudden and quick. It wasn't until we got in the little theater that we both like opened our eyes and went to WTF is going on. So yeah, kidnap might be a strong word, but that was my one and only brush with Scientology. You should look at the Yelp reviews for the churches and buildings related to Scientology in California. There are so many stories very similar to this one. It's apparently very common. I wouldn't doubt it. Those people are off their rockers. At the time this happened MySpace was still pretty popular. I had posted about it and someone from a supposed anonymous group contacted me and shared the story with a bunch of other people chiming in as similar experiences. My friend and I once missed the last train home after a gig and wandered around a nearby harbor, killing time until the train started up again. A drunk man, around 30 years older than us at the time, stumbled out of a building and invited us onto his boat. We sat with him drinking rum for a few hours while he regaled us with stories about all the sex parties he'd hosted on this boat. I didn't believe him, but I was warm and had a drink in hand, so I humored him. He eventually pulled a lever near the front which opened a secret door to a sex dungeon filled with all kinds of bondage gear and sex toys. We then added each other on Facebook and my friend and I went to catch our train back to London. Wow. Talk about an implication. I mean, if they said no the answer is obviously no. But the thing is, that they aren't gonna say no, because of the implication. Are these women in danger? No. When I was much younger, pre-teen, I was outside watching shooting stars. It was that time of year where you can see lots of comets fly by. It was the middle of the night, and I was laying in the grass just enjoying the stars and comets. My older stepsister had just gone inside to grab a drink. Out of nowhere, the entire night sky lit up bright blue for a nanosecond. All that was left when it faded was a blue streak across the sky, and what looked kinda like a ship at the front of the streak. I didn't know what I was seeing, but it looked like it was rotating slowly. It eventually disappeared, but the trail was still in the sky. Immediately I rushed inside to try and get people out to see it. By the time they got outside, it had faded completely. Nobody believed me. I found out later it was just a SpaceX launch, but I thought I had seen a genuine UFO for years. I know I saw it, but I didn't tell anyone, because I'd sound crazy. You did see a UFO, then you identified it. Now it's a knife OC. I saw a girl who contracted a rare African parasite shoot crack, causing tiny worms to crawl out of the hole in her arm and from the corners of her eyes. It happened. I'm sure it did. I saw the worms. She held one up and said, "See, I told you. This is what they look like." I threw it on the floor and burned it with a lighter. I wasn't even on drugs because I had a drug test for probation in the morning. It's like my own brain is trying to convince me it didn't happen, but I'm sure of it. Can happen with a worm called Taenia solium. Source: med student. When I was 9 or 10 years old, I was walking around in our flat and wondering what was itching below my foot. So I looked, and I had a thumbtack sticking all the way inside my heel. I have no clue why, but it didn't hurt at all. I had a huge shock though. Also interesting to note that the hole is still there 12 years later. You got a thick layer of dead skin there. If you walked around barefoot a lot, it can easily be as thick as a thumbtack. The itching implying it got very close to your next skin layer, or was scratching it. Hole stays because you haven't filed down your dead boy skin over all those years. It's not so crazy, but I feel like every time I tried to tell it, people don't believe me. I was driving around a city pretty lost before cell phones /GPS and was stopped at the end of an alleyway waiting for an opportunity to turn when a cop pulled up to my right. He rolled down the window and motioned for me to roll down my window. I was of course super nervous, thinking that perhaps I drove erratically due to being lost, or maybe I'm somewhere I shouldn't be. Once my window was down, he does a what's up nod and asks, "Wanna race?" I'm now even more confused, but he repeats the question. I tell him no, and that I'm lost. He asks me where I need to go, and I give him the name of the restaurant. He tells me to follow him, and I get to follow him all across the city, going through stop signs and lights, stopping traffic every once in a while, when he'd wait for me to pull over again, and he'd park beside me and give me a heads up of what turns we'd be doing next. Led me all the way to the restaurant. It's a good thing you were alone. If I was riding with you, I would have called upon the wisdom of Chappelle. Shit, you know, sometimes you just gotta race. I fell asleep listening to a CD one day, and a little bit later woke up to it still playing, and on it a part where they did a skit before a song. The skit was kinda funny, but there was one part one couldn't hear, so I got out of bed to rewind it, and when it played back it was entirely in French. I don't speak French, but could understand what they were saying clear as day a minute earlier. I don't know what happened. Omelette du fromage. That's all you can say. When I was 21, I was going through a really lost and stressful time in my life. I'm not religious and don't really believe in spirituality or the paranormal, but I kept having sleep paralysis episodes that seemed so real. The hallucinations, the panic, everything was very much real and right in front of me. An old lady who was my neighbor heard from my mother that this was happening to me, so she had me call this guy who apparently was like a guru with paranormal experiences like that. He basically told me to simply go through my room, and every day, before going to bed, to tell whatever it was that was causing these episodes that it wasn't welcome and to go away. So I decided to humor him in hopes that it would make it stop, and after doing this 1 or 2 times, I wake up in late morning and notice that I can't move. I look up and there are these 2 beings in my room talking to each other in this strange form of language, doing things like clicking and using solid tones. They notice that I'm awake, and one of them slowly comes over to me on my bed and says to me, "If you would like, we can show you your past, present, and future," except it didn't say it out loud like in words. It like forced this sentence into my mind and I could hear it without hearing it. I know that is very vague, but it's the only way I can describe it. Basically it was like a really loud thought. I still have no idea what it really meant by saying that, but I look back at this thing and barely am able to shake my head and let out a very weak and scared no thank you, and they both leave my room and I have never had another experience like that again. Still not convinced it wasn't just a wild hallucination, but definitely a weird and interesting experience nonetheless, especially with how it hasn't ever happened to me since. Makes me wonder what would have happened if I had said yes to this thing instead of no thank you. Either way, I tend to keep this story to myself as I completely understand how it sounds, and would admittedly have trouble believing it if someone else told me the same story. Something similar happened to me. You're not crazy, and no thank you was the right answer. I'm interested. Care to share your story? I went with a friend to a weekend party in a mansion. I knew he was sorta sketchy, dealing drugs, and so we came to the mansion and I didn't really think there was anything strange going on. As the evening went on we were all going to the sauna and there the drugs came out. These people were Lithuanian, and I didn't understand what they were saying, but when I didn't really want to do cocaine I could feel how the tension in the room went sour. My friend who also was Lithuanian spoke with them for what felt like hours when the lines of coke were just lying in front of me. After a while everyone started smiling. He had told them I was too big of a pussy to do any drugs with criminals, and was just a softie from Scandinavia. After that things calmed down, and we went to bed at around 3. At 4 I was woken up by my friend who just screamed at me to get in the car. On the way out to the car I saw some people carrying a giant rug into the trunk of a car. I learned later that a guy had odd, and he was in the rug. The people he had invited me to party with were the Lithuanian mafia. Didn't really feel comfortable hanging around with him later, when I learned that his friends that could drop by his apartment now and then were actually part of organized crime. I saw some people carrying a giant rug into the trunk of a car. I learned later that a guy had odd, and he was in the rug. I can only assume they had a dedicated valet like Sir Arthur Henry would house fetch the rug for them. When I was 6 I was in a car with my aunt. While she was driving I opened door and fell out. Luckily she didn't drive fast. Probably she just started driving. I can't remember. So I wasn't hurt. I told that to my family several times already, and they refused to believe. Few weeks ago, I was with my aunt, and she told me that story, and asked me do I remember that. On my first day of school, in I think social studies, I had a sudden feeling of content knowledge that I knew everyone. That kind of feeling you get when you've been there for a while, which didn't make any sense, as it was the first day of school and I knew I didn't know any of these other kids. Then the feeling went away as I questioned it, and I shrugged it off, until during the last week of school, in the same class, bored and ready to go, I suddenly felt mildly panicked that I didn't know anyone, as if it was the first day again. Then I remembered how I felt on the first day. I think I experienced a time swap. Got a knife put to my throat as a joke once when I was little and decided to go play outside on my own. Only told my parents years later because I didn't want them to worry. Weird child logic. Looking back at it, I got hit by a car when I was about 8, and I was genuinely more worried about my family finding out than I was about being hurt. The guy that hit me knew my family, and word got round to them eventually, since I pretty much ran off after I got up from the ground and said some incoherent things. He was still worried sick about me, and tried to find out how I was. I was right to fear their reaction. Got a good beating out of it. I'm confused. Is this a joke, or did your family actually beat you for getting hit by a car? No joke. My family beat me for getting hit by a car. Pretty badly too. They were not very nice people. For 1 week, when I got the flu my farts would whistle no matter what position I was in. My dog kept thinking I was calling him. I was playing with snow on the top of my building, and then I hear a bullet pass next to me. So I pronounced, then I heard a gunshot from far, and right after that a bullet hits the glass behind me. I released it's a sniper. He shoot 5 bullets or 4. I don't remember exactly, but none hit me. I went down, told my mother, but she didn't believe me, and didn't care that much. I live in Syria. I honestly didn't believe you till I got to the part where you said you live in Syria. Not as crazy as other comments on here, but I once cracked open 2 double-yolked eggs in a row. I got an entire carton of double-yolked eggs a while back. Blew my fucking mind. Okay, this is literally for me. One night I was coming back from a friend's house to my house. It was 7 PM when I left, and after a 20 minutes walk I arrived home. Though there is a small problem. I arrived home at 7 AM next morning. The lighting was the same, and I didn't ever notice a change in the amount of daylight. The only reason I noticed something was off is because upon arriving home my dad was leaving for work and asked me why I had returned so early. Completely confused I asked what he meant, and he showed me his watch. I was taken aback, and he noticed something was wrong. He asked what was wrong, and I told him. He looked me dead in the eye and started laughing. He said we had spoken at 10 p.m. and I had told him that I would be staying for the night at the friend's house. I left at 7 p.m. Friend confirmed time of departure and dad confirms time of arrival as he was leaving for work, and also I myself remember that. This leaves us with a 12-hour gap in which I have no idea what was I doing and where I was. My dad didn't believe me and thought I was pranking him. Thankfully it has been 1.5 years since that and nothing like that has happened since. Still gives me the chills trying to understand how could something like this happen. OMG, I have a very similar story. So I have an alarm set for 10:30 p.m. every day to take birth control. So the other day I was downstairs on the couch watching TV and the alarm went off. So I got up, went to my room to take the pill. Then I quickly went to the bathroom and headed down again. So I didn't miss too much of the show I was watching. BTW, it always comes on from 10:10 p.m. until 11:25 p.m. Suddenly my brother was downstairs watching some other show even though he left the house at 9:45 p.m. to go to a friend's house. I was mad confused and asked him why he was home, and he said I told you I won't be leaving until after 9:30 p.m. So I checked my watch and it was roughly 9 p.m. Like how? My alarm went off at 10:30 and I checked to see if I had any other alarm set that day but I hadn't. Also the fact that my show was on before which starts at 10:10 p.m. and I even closed the door behind my brother when he left is so weird. It honestly gives me chills because I feel like I traveled back in time not really knowing. IDK, it's just so weird and I can't figure out what happened that day. Did you rewatch that episode of the show and it was the exact same as the first time you watched it? Yes, OMG, I forgot to mention that. I mean, since it started only 20 minutes earlier I haven't seen too much, but it was literally the same, and I knew what was going to happen in the show up until 10:30 p.m, which was when the alarm went off, and I got up. Would have been terrifying if your alarm went off and you were stuck in like an hour loop of you watching the first 20 minutes of the same show. Okay, buckle up. This is the story of the worst day of my life. My boyfriend's dog ate 1.5 pounds of chocolates Rumbles our house guests had purchased and left in their room while we went out for breakfast. We came home to find a very drunken, very sick corgi and more poop and vomit than a dog that size should even be able to produce. Meanwhile I realize that smell isn't all just from the dog. You see, it has been raining very hard for days and turns out the lift station in our community is ancient and the motor died. I live at the lowest point in the community. Buckets of sewage water backed up out of both toilets and spilled into our home. So there are our horrified guests, profusely apologizing and gagging. They had to leave to catch a plane and my boyfriend had to leave so he could get little drunky McChocaholic's stomach pumped. So there I was. 2 bathrooms full of human waste and a living room full of dog shit and vomit. I cleaned it all up alone. I threw out the clothes I was wearing and took a 2-hour shower that night. It was the most disgusting mess I've ever seen in my life. I had to light like so many candles. My god, the stench. I went through more bottles of bleach than a hospital custodian. But wait, there's more. Boyfriend comes home. Dog is gonna be okay thankfully. The vet had kept her overpass to observe her and allow her to sober up, but she was fine. I call our hoa, and they promised to have someone come to figure out a solution to the sewage pump problem. That night I settle in for bed and fall fast asleep just happy that the day was over. Around 6 a.m. I'm suddenly jarred awake by the sound of an incredibly wet fart followed by a putrid smell. I slowly become aware that there is now a puddle of diarrhea less than 6 inches from my face. Turns out my chihuahua, whom occasionally has bout of stomach issues, had crawled into my bed and then proceeded to get sick right next to my face. My boyfriend had already left for work, so I cleaned up the mess, cursing my incredibly bad luck, and then walked into the bathroom to shower only to find the toilets had backed up again. Damn, that's shitty.